Excuse me. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Flagship Podcast. I'm all choked up. I'm also Chip Brown of the Horns 247.com family, joined by my brother from another mother in the Horns 24/7 family, the one and only Eric Henry, proud Tampa Catholic graduate, coming to us from Charlotte, North Carolina, where the Texas men's basketball team will open the season tonight against the Duke Blue Devils. Eric, how are you doing? How is Charlotte? And are you excited?
Oh, man, Chip Brown. I am always excited. Charlotte, North Carolina, one of my favorite cities, low-key for any Texas fans who haven't been. Of course, being the SEC, there probably won't be much of a reason to go to Charlotte outside of March Madness. But for those of you who made the trip a couple of years back, you can probably attest. Charlotte's a beautiful city, especially the downtown area this time of year. The leaves change, a little chill in the air. So it's a beautiful place. Happy to be here in Charlotte. And for those of you who are listening to the recording of this, part of Chip's intro won't make any sense because you won't hear what he referenced. But if you watch this, you will see what he referenced in his intro. If you listened, it'll just be something that you'll just have to use your imagination. But nevertheless, doing great to be here in Charlotte. And man, Chip, I'm excited. Duke is one of those programs that I would love to. I know you and I've talked about this. Can't remember if it was off air or at some point. In the 3 years we've been together, we've talked about, venues we'd like to go to. I'd love to cover a game at Cameron Indoor. Haven't been there yet, but this one is at Spectrum Center. But love the opportunity to cover Duke, John Shire, number 6 team in the nation, the Boozer Twins. We'll get into all that in a bit, but definitely fired up for the opportunity to cover a Duke game, Chip.
Yeah, we'll kick things off with a little football. Texas, if you are a regular listener, viewer of the Flagship Podcast, you hopefully saw our post-game breakdown of Texas's 34-31 win over Vanderbilt. The Longhorns are now off and will return to action in Athens, Georgia on November 15th against the Bulldogs, who beat Texas twice last year, including in overtime in the SEC championship game. So, Eric, a couple things as we now look forward, coming out of Texas's 4 straight wins over Oklahoma, Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. It only took 9 games, Eric, but it appears Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian have landed on a solution on the offensive line by playing Connor Robertson at center and Cole Hudson at left guard. That gets more experience on the field. The interior of the offensive line has been a problem, primarily at left guard. We've seen Neto for 73 snaps, none since the Sam Houston game. Connor Stroh started there, then Nick Brooks. There have been some injuries in there, but Eric, your thoughts, like how excited should fans be about this new offensive line rotation?
Cautious optimism, Chip, is what I would say. On the show before, you've heard me use the old baseball statistic, right? Wins above replacement, right? Or I guess to me that's not specific to baseball. Maybe it's just a general advanced statistic. For those who aren't familiar, right? Wins above replacement is basically saying, how much more valuable is this player in the lineup compared to the player who may replace them at said position or at a specific position. In this case, Chip, I think we have enough of a sample size to say that while Nick Brooks is a player clearly that Steve Sarkisian, Kyle Flood and company are optimistic on, right? Optimistic about, I should say. If you take a look at his size, it certainly provides a lot there to be optimistic about. For the rest of this year, maybe he's just not ready to play the number of snaps that he was playing previously, right? I think especially in pass protection. I don't know what value people may assign to Pro Football Focus rankings, right? I think, Chip, and I'm not saying this to be snarky or being a smart aleck, as opposed to another phrase I'll use on a different show. If you're trying to find the value between a, say, 60 and 70 or 75 PFF grade, right? That is very subjective. That is up for discussion, right? That is up to the people who graded PFF and the game watchers, right? Chip, those 8s and 9s, there's not really much wiggle room there for that, right? I'm only saying that as to say, when Nick Brooks or whoever it was, I shouldn't pick on Nick specifically, whoever the left guard spot, when it was grading out in pass protection in the 8s and 10s and 12s, it's not good, right? We have enough of a sample size to say that Cole Hudson, his value for this team is probably better at left guard as opposed to at center, and then trying to rotate the players that you were rotating at left guard. And Connor Robertson is doing enough, Chip, and I think the key phrase is enough. And I don't want to discredit Connor, right? Like I don't want to, it's like I'm bashing him, but Chip, let's call a spade a spade. If you can put DJ Campbell on one side of Connor Robertson and put Cole Hudson, who has shown, again, is he all conference, all world? Maybe not, but he's a reliable starting left guard in the SEC on the other side of him. That gives you more value than the lineups they were trotting out before, Chip.
Yeah. I mean, look, we saw some things in the Texas Vanderbilt game that are encouraging. They picked up blitzes. They protected Arch Manning. I joked that, Arch started off 2 of 5 passing and then realized, oh, wow, I'm getting protected here. And he completed 10 straight passes and 17 of 19 as Texas, went up 31-10 at that point. So, I don't know why it took this long. I mean, Steve Sarkisian on Monday basically said, Connor Robertson and Cole Hudson aren't the biggest, strongest, most athletic, but they've got experience, and an experience right now is what this offensive line needs, is what Steve Sarkisian said, so that Trevor Gooseby doesn't have to basically coach the guy right next to him all through the play, which happens. In the offensive line business. I mean, I remember, Christian Jones coaching DJ Campbell as a young player, coaching Cole Hudson as a young player when they were, playing at guard. So, I think there's reason for optimism, cautious optimism, but there's no better test for this offensive line than going to Georgia, which sacked Texas 13 times in their 2 meetings last year. Now, they only have 8 sacks, Eric, Georgia, through 8 games, which, Texas has 34 sacks, and Texas leads the nation. We'll get to that in a second. But, Eric, do you think that this newfangled offensive line immediately contributed to Arch Manning going, 25 of 33 for 300 plus yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks against Vanderbilt?
I don't think I know, and again, I'm not being sarcastic when I say that's very abundant, right? That, as you kind of, said in jest, right? Oh man, Arch Manning realizes he's being protected. This is the best that Arch Manning has been protected all season against, again, no disrespect to Sam Houston, real competition, right? This is the best he's been protected all season long.
Top 10 team.
The top 10 team. And not only that, Chip, Texas ran for 100 yards. Is it great? Is it 300 yards? Is it $180? No, but it's a start. It's better than where they had been prior, right? So there's no doubt that this offensive line has played a factor, or did play a factor, in that win. Now, the question for me is, going forward, can they play a factor over the next 3 weeks? They've answered the first test, right? Because I said that Vandy's run defense is very legit. Vandy's defense as a whole was very legit, right? But can Texas continue to establish a run game? It's the old Michael Jordan quote, right? When, I can't remember who the player was. I don't want to, say the wrong player, but in The Last Dance, when, MJ's talking to a player and the player's like, yeah, I'm going to bring my A game. And MJ says, I don't need you to bring your A game, just bring A game. Right? That's what Texas is looking for from their offensive line heading to Georgia. And of course, and I don't mean to disrespect Arkansas, but I mean, they're having the year they're having. So heading to Georgia, and of course, when Texas A&M comes to town, Chip.
Yeah. I think when you look at Arch Manning, we're seeing some carryover. We're seeing week-to-week improvement, which sign of a well-coached team is week-to-week improvement across the board. But when you've had a year like Arch Manning has had, some of it was him getting out of his own head and then, looking really good against Oklahoma, then kind of relapsing back into some, missing layups, as Steve Sarkisian called them, against Kentucky. And then against Mississippi State, after, an up and down game, for him to turn it on the way he did late is a great sign, because you've got to finish games. And even though he didn't technically finish the game, he got them to overtime with the help of Ryan Niblett. And then obviously Matthew Caldwell comes in, throws the touchdown pass in overtime. But for Arch Manning to come off the concussion and, look as good as he did, and he sounded different. He was in a funny, joking mood. He was making fun of himself for throwing the Hail Mary into the students section. Said he's going to work on that during the bye week. But there's just a different feel, Eric, I would say. And I want to get your opinion on that, because we saw Arch look good against OU, and then it didn't last. Does this feel different to you?
Yes, because they did it for an entire game. And they did it for an entire game against a top 10 opponent. That does feel different. Even against OU in the Cotton Bowl, Red River Shootout. Chip, my memory serves me correct. That was a 6-3 game at the half?
Yeah.
Right?
It was a great third quarter from Arch in the offense. That's
why this feels different. Also, I think the way Texas did it feels different, Chip. And I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, because we talked in good detail about it in our flagship post-game reaction. But the ability to manufacture quick offense, right? This is actually what I would love your opinion on more than anything else. I thought Steve Sarkisian's answer when I asked him in the post-game about what he saw on Saturday offensively that could be transferable throughout the rest of the year, I thought his answer was revealing. I thought it's the answer that maybe we as media members or even Texas fans would have liked to have hear him say, but he's not speaking for us, right? He's speaking to his team with each time he gets in front of a camera. When he said, Chip, that quite frankly, the offense wasn't mature enough, and he talked about Arch and it being in various positions. And he also said that they established early on in the year that, okay, we're going to slow things down and play to the strengths of our team, which is the defense. And now they feel they have the ability to speed things up and spread things out. And directly, if I'm directly quoting Steve, he said, air it out. But when he was answering my question, he made a hand motion like this, right? Talking about spreading out the offense, not talking about airing out, going over the top of the defense behind the secondary. Chip, that's the offense we saw from Texas the last 2 years. And now, may have taken them 8, 9, 10 weeks into the year. It appears to me that there's finally a measure of comfort from Steve Sarkisian more than anything else to be able to run the offense that he wants to. I think that was the answer, Chip. I always thought, I think I may have said it, but always thought, if you're not seeing the things that have been staples in the offense over the past 2 years, it's not because Steve Sarkisian forgot how to call plays or he's being stubborn. I know there's a measure of Texas fans. There are a measure of Texas fans who believe it's stubbornness, right? Maybe that is a factor because, and I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth here for a second. Chip wrote a great feature earlier in the year talking about Steve Sarkisian, his him being steadfast in wanting to push the ball downfield, right? Because saying it was one of Arch Manning's strengths, right? I don't know what the mid ground is, Chip, between we believe this is one of our quarterback's strengths and this isn't beneficial for the offense as a whole if you can't block, right? So my point is, in passing it back to you, I felt his answer was revealing and saying, hey, maybe some of those concepts that you saw on Saturday, we just couldn't do well enough. So we were going to play to what we believe the strength of our quarterback is, which is going downfield.
Yeah. Yeah. And we wrote about it coming out of the Florida game that his time to throw was averaging, well over 3 seconds. And it put him in the longest time to throw among the 5 longest time to throws in, FBS. And asked Steve Sarkisian about it because clearly, getting the ball out quickly has been a revelation for this offense. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a high percentage of completions on passes 0 to 5 yards. And then we're seeing more completions now of 5 to 14. And then on the 2 or 3 passes or 4, instead of 17, 15 plus pass attempts that we saw against Florida, only 6 of which were completed. The drives, they're sustaining drives. We're seeing double-digit drives that are that we talked about in the post-game show. The third quarter, that was enormous because Vanderbilt had just gotten into rhythm in the second quarter. They got the ball to start, and the Texas defense gets them off the field, and then Arch Manning leads a double-digit play drive, eats clock, gets a touchdown, leads another one to a field goal, but held the ball for 10 plus minutes in the third quarter. That proved to be absolutely essential because we know the fourth quarter went completely haywire in Vanderbilt's favor. So, I'm very interested to see how they use this off week to, get their fundamentals and technique down, like Sarkisian said, but what wrinkles do they add for Georgia? Because this is not the same Georgia team that Texas faced a year ago. We'll get into that in a second. But one thing that has completely shown itself over the last 4 games, Eric, is this Texas pass rush. We're seeing, the sack numbers. They've averaged almost 6 sacks per game the last 4 games, and now lead the nation in sacks with 34. A&M has 32 sacks, and they've only played 8 games, so they have they're actually, higher sacks per game than Texas, but Texas has 34 sacks, which leads the nation. And it's been impressive. I mean, you've got, Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill, Trey Moore, Ethan Burke, and Brad Spence all have at least 3 sacks in the last 4 games. Colin Simmons has 7.5. And Anthony Hill had 3 sacks against Mississippi State. So we're seeing a conscious effort to play Anthony Hill more at the strong side linebacker position to keep him closer to the line and be involved in the pass rush as he was again against Vanderbilt. He's got 41 snaps of pass rush the last 3 games. That's more than the first 6 games combined when he only had 38 pass rush snaps. Now, does that hurt them, Eric, when you've got Leonga Lafau and Anthony Smith sort of manning the middle and weak side linebacker positions so that Anthony Hill can, be closer to the line, rush the passer? Or has the payoff been good enough that you keep going with that?
No, you landed exactly where I was going to land at the end there. I think Anthony Hill showed his value. We joked around about it, I think it was a couple weeks ago, right? Saying that when Anthony Hill was a freshman and the only thing he really knew how to do, right? And this is not my words, it's kind of, going back to what defensive coordinator Pete Kwiatkowski said, is he wasn't, necessarily a great linebacker, but he knew how to find the ball, right? I think at this point in the year, Chip, games like this, Vandy, Georgia, Texas A&M, let your guy go do what he does, right? And quite frankly, and this is a whole different discussion, it's always a weird juxtaposition as to using players. This is kind of like the LSU Harold Perkins thing, right, from a few years back, where it's okay, you want to showcase that player X has a multitude of skills for the next level, but at the same point in time, you're trying to show off or maybe not show off, but you're trying to use that player in the best of their ability so that they can help you while they're in college, right? Well, I think, it's just my opinion, Anthony Hill's clearly been solid in pass coverage, right? He had the nice pick a couple of weeks back. He's improved as a linebacker, as an all-around linebacker, as a guy who can play in space. But Chip, I don't think it's out of bounds, and I'm asking here, this isn't rhetorical. Anthony Hill, as an NFL player, is going to be Micah Parsons. He's going to be a guy who, sure, maybe he's listed at linebacker, but he's going to play near the line of scrimmage and be a heat-seeking missile. Am I wrong?
No, I think that's right.
So, if that's what Anthony Hill is going to be at the next level, and that's very much a strength of his now, again, I understand why maybe you want to do a little bit more, be a little more versatile, because it also provides more versatility for your defense, right? I understand that. But in big time games like this, yeah, I would just let Anthony Hill do what he does best. And quite frankly, Chip, and you wrote about the 23 sacks for the last 4 games. If Texas can get, I'm not saying they got to get 23 sacks, but if they can get that type of pass rush, just pass rush, harass Gunnar Stockton, harass Marcel Reed, right? And maybe come A&M, maybe there is a situation where Anthony Hill's a little bit more of a spy, right, on Marcel Reed. But I also think if you just harass him and get in his face, right, as long as everyone else is playing their gap, well, you speed up Marcel Reed, right? I think those things can lead you to victories. So no, that's where I land as far as Anthony Hill's concerned. And this pass rushing, just to add, touch on that part, Ethan Burks had sacks. Colin Simmons is coming on. The interior, they're starting to look like guys who can at least speed up quarterbacks up the middle with the pass rush. So it's all coming together at the right time.
Yeah. I think, and it has coincided with the secondary playing without Michael Taft. And we know that that's been an issue. And it's so interesting, Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator, his default is to keep everything in front of the defense, play bend, but don't break, give up yards between the 20s and then buckle down. But they did turn loose the pass rush more toward the end of the Mississippi State game, and it totally worked. Ethan Burke, with the 4th down sack and strip, to end the game against Mississippi State. And then they brought pressure against Diego Pavia and Colin Simmons strip sack on Vanderbilt's first possession. Colin Simmons was a man possessed. Ethan Burke said, his first 20 to 30 plays against Vanderbilt were unbelievable. And not that he said not that there was a drop off, but that those first 20 to 30 plays were amazing. And it was a Colin Simmons pressure that allowed Ethan Burke to work through a double team to get to Pavia for a sack that ended up forcing a 48-yard field goal that Vanderbilt's kicker missed, his first miss of the season. So I say all that, Eric, to say, Pete Kwiatkowski, trust your guys. You have downhill players. You have guys who love getting after the quarterback, who are really good at getting after the quarterback. And they showed against Vanderbilt that they can stay disciplined in their pass rush lanes. In other words, not let Pavia, break out for a bunch of devastating scrambles. Now, I get it. He did have some devastating scrambles there in the 4th quarter, but, on 4th and 19, I'm bringing the house. And so when you play that soft coverage and give a guy like Diego Pavia time, he's going to find the open guy. I think Gunnar Stockton the quarterback at Georgia, and Diego Pavia have more similarities, Eric, than maybe people want to admit. But I think if I'm Pete Kwiatkowski and I just saw what my defense did against Diego Pavia, I'm feeling pretty good about going to Athens with this defense. But you got to stay aggressive. And Steve Sarkisian said something that I thought was kind of telling. I want to get your opinion on this. So on Monday, he said, sometimes it feels like we're, and I need to get this exact quote because I don't want to butcher this.
Help me out, Chip, because I wasn't there, so I'm relying on you.
Yeah. No, he said, okay, he said, quote, clearly we were banged up in the secondary, and there was a moment in there where we didn't have either starting corner. We didn't have either starting safety, and we were holding on a little bit. And we've got to play more with the mindset of going to go win the game, not just holding on not to lose the game. So that will be something that we get to work on, end quote. That felt to me like we need to stay aggressive. Because when they went into soft coverage, Eric, Vanderbilt went up and down the field. So, A, the secondary was not its normal self, but B, your pass rush can help that secondary. So why are you playing soft coverage and rushing 4 when you got some question marks in that secondary is my question.
Chip, when I hear that, it takes me back to one specific place. And when I mention it to you, I think you're going to agree wholeheartedly. Does that not sound like the 2023 season in its entirety?
Yes. Yes. When they had 20-point leads against Houston, K-State, and TCU and ended up hanging on for dear life.
That's precisely what it sounds like. And I it's weird because we all think the world of Pete Kwiatkowski as a defensive coordinator, and I don't think that's a stubbornness thing. I think that maybe, I would have to, Chip, this is my 3rd season, covering Texas. I feel like in order to truly get an answer on that, like I would have to have been covering PK for the past decade as previous stops, is to get a feel like, is that just where you feel you're at with the secondary, right? In this case, you were missing players as opposed to players being injured or not playing at the level you would have liked. In 2023, certainly was partially injuries, right? Jade Barron was banged up. Also, Ryan Watts, if I remember seriously correct, was banged up for a decent amount of the stretch that year. But was also the secondary wasn't playing to the level you would have liked. I would like to know if that's just a defensive philosophy of his, whereas, hey, if we're not as strong as I would like in the secondary, we're going to kind of be, play back a little bit. We'll let you have the underneath stuff as long as we tackle. Maybe that's the philosophy, right? We've come so far as a tackling group that we feel that if they're completing passes underneath, we can go out there and make a stop, right? Or maybe the thought is, I don't know, you can get a pass rush with 4. Again, Chip, I have not had a chance to, and I'm not going to bash, as I said last during the postgame show, I'm not going to bash a certain streaming service publicly, but you can do the math there. I've not had a chance to have access to my usual replays that I would of the game, Chip. So I haven't rewatched the game. I'm going to depend on you here. I remember Cade Phillips and Jonah Williams and some other guys being in the secondary. I know Colton Vasek played a little bit. I know Ethan Burke was there because I know Ethan Burke almost got home twice on Diego Pavia late in the game. It felt like there were some reserves on playing in the back end, but it felt like up front there still were more starters than anything else. So maybe the thought process there is, hey, we can get home with 4. I don't know. But in specificity to Steve Sarkisian's quote, it sounds exactly like 2023 to me. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, listen, I hate to be I know a dead horse when I beat one, but I'm still beating this one. The prevent defense on the final play of the first half against Ohio State. Like, to me, that's unforgivable. 29 seconds left. You've got them pinned in their own end of the field. Keep playing your defense. keep on the attack, keep doing what's been working. This defense doesn't react well to playing on its heels and going backwards. Like the thought of Anthony Hill dropping 20 yards into coverage on that play is mind-boggling to me. I want Anthony Hill. I want everybody getting after, the Will Howard, but it is what it is. And it does feel like 2023 all over again. So let's see how Texas handles it, because Kirby is going to bring the house until Texas shows they can handle it. That's what he did last year. He just kept bringing it, and Texas couldn't handle it. So he just kept doing it, and he got 13 sacks out of those 2 games. And that's where, don't be afraid to keep running what's working. I mean, Anthony Hill had 2 sacks on the same pressure back to back against Mississippi State. That's what I'm talking about. Like, run it again, run it. Steve Spurrier would run a play 6 times in a row until the defense could show it could stop it. There's no crime in that, Eric, but I'll move on. Georgia, I mentioned earlier in the show, they only have 8 sacks on the season through 8 games. This is a Georgia team that had 20 sacks through 8 games a year ago, and obviously got well on the sack total against Texas. You've got Gunnar Stockton, you've got receivers who are catching the football this year. You've got Nate Frazier at running back. You've got new faces on the offensive line, but Georgia has shown they can compete in a shootout, Eric. They beat Ole Miss in a shootout. They beat Tennessee in a shootout, and they had to come from behind to do it against Tennessee on the road. Your thoughts on this Georgia team? They're a top 5 team, but, the numbers aren't quite what they've been.
Yeah, the numbers aren't, especially defensively, aren't as impressive, right? They're 26 in points per game, allowed 26 in the nation. You used to Georgia either being, top 1, 2, or 3, right, in points per game allowed on defense. But they still got the guys. Dalen Everett, he goes down the category of Longhorn killer, just like Will Lee over at Texas A&M. Dalen Everett has had excellent games against the Longhorns.
3 interceptions in 2 games.
There you go.
He and Jahdae Barron. Jahdae Barron had 3 interceptions against Georgia.
CJ Allen, still an incredibly talented linebacker, right? Depending on who you want to listen to, is the top-rated pro linebacking prospect in this draft. I still would take Anthony Hill over CJ Allen, but maybe that's my bias covering Texas, right? So you still have the guys. We're not asking them to play Texas 12 times. We're asking them to play once on the road, right? I'm saying if you're Kirby Smart. So you certainly have to respect what they can do. You talked about the guys, Zachariah Branch is leading them in receptions, but still have, the run game. And you talked about Gunnar Stockton being a little more Diego Pavia than people realize. Yeah, I mean, he's got 7 rushing touchdowns this year. He's a guy who can escape the pocket and keep things alive with his legs. That's something Texas will have to account for, right? Is he Diego Pavia in this kind of, bravado and I'm 5'9", 220 pounds, going to run through you?
Not at all.
No, but he's Gunnar Stockton has his own underdog story, right? he has it's just not, maybe as pronounced or as, boisterous or, kind of swaggy as Diego Pavia, right? But Gunnar Stockton in his own right has his own underdog story. Chip, I've said this many times when talking about Georgia. In order to be the man, you have to beat the man, right? And Georgia has proven that they can beat Texas. Now Texas will have to prove that they can beat Georgia, especially this game on the road in Athens.
At night
was announced that it's going to be a 6:30 Central, so 7:30 Eastern time, 7:30 Athens time kickoff. Yeah, that's going to be a unique environment. What gives me a measure of optimism, and we wrote about this on the site, our staff roundtable, as far as a couple things that give us optimism for Texas being able to go to Georgia and win. One, I do believe, Chip, as coach speaky as it sounds, I do believe in the idea that this program went 42 days without a home game, and 3 of those games were on the road, right? Florida, intense environment. We know what happened there. Mississippi State, intense environment. Texas came up with a win. Kentucky, I'm not saying that, Commonwealth Stadium or Kroger Field, I guess it's called now, is Athens. However, when Texas comes to town and you let Kentucky hang around for 2 quarters, Chip, you were there. I'm sure that place was pretty rocking and it was an intense environment, right? So I do think, and especially coming off of the Florida game and going to the Red River Shootout and winning, right? I do think those things really bonded this team and shaped this team in terms of, give them their own calluses, Chip. Every team has its own story, right? This is not a group. There are plenty of veterans: Anthony Hill, Michael Taft, Malik Muhammad, Jalen Gilbo, Ethan Burke, Cole Hudson, et cetera, but you still have a lot of guys who are stepping into new roles, right? So guys who need their own calluses, their own kind of mental wherewithal to know that, hey, in the third quarter, if the place is going crazy and all the fans are waving their towels and it's loud, you can't hear yourself thinking, so on and so forth, we've been here before, right? That matters to me, Chip. So yes, it's going to be a challenge. And if you ask me right now, I probably would pick Georgia just because that's how I've felt. I picked Texas. When Texas came into the home meeting as number 1 team in the nation, I picked Texas. Obviously, we know what happened there. Ever since then, I've picked Georgia. In order to be the man, you got to beat the man. But I feel much better from a Texas point of view heading into this game than I would have prior to the Vandy game.
Yeah. One last thing before we get to basketball. Steve Sarkisian said in the post game after the win over Vanderbilt, we're one of the younger teams in the country. He said, quote, every team is different, and I'm proud of them that they've grown the way that they've grown, and they're maturing rapidly. We're one of the younger teams in the country, but they're growing up before our eyes, and that's a very good thing. He went on to say, it's easy to point to Arch because I think we all can sit here and say, we can see this guy maturing before our eyes, but it's everybody down in that locker room. What'd you make of that? We're starting to hear that more now. Texas, one of the younger teams in the country. We didn't hear that going into the season.
Thank you for teaming me up, Chip. I'm not picking on Steve for this, but remember when Steve said, we're not young, we're inexperienced. All right, which one is it? You tell me. I think it's a narrative you can use when it's convenient. Is it semantics? I mean, I don't know. Youth and experience, take your pick, right? I guess the point that Steve made when he would push back on the label of youth is, oh, well, it's not like we're walking with a bunch of true freshmen, right? But I would venture to guess that after the season has played out the way it has, that there is probably more youth and experience are more analogous than maybe Steve Sarkisian would have wanted to admit entering the year. While also, and I've said this before earlier in the show, and I'll continue to say it, Steve is not talking. There is never a moment in which a head coach, sometimes players, and maybe sometimes coaches, they speak emotionally. But for the most part doing this job, Chip, coaches are not speaking to the media. They are speaking to their team, and we are just the vessel, right? So maybe Steve Sarkisian wanted to use the phrase inexperience because he doesn't want his guys feeling like, oh, we're young, that's an excuse for the standard to drop, right? Now, as we're again 8, 9, 10 weeks into the year, maybe, just maybe, the thought is, well, guys, we're playing with house money. We're young. All right, go cut it loose. Go have fun. Go play football, right? I'm just venturing to guess there. But yeah, the first place my mind goes is, and you teed me up, that was not what we heard entering the year.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to basketball. The Texas women's basketball team, ranked number 4, opened the season at home with a 123-51 waxing of Incarnate Word. And I did a 3 takeaways from this game. Eric, Aaliyah Crump, what a first quarter for Aaliyah Crump. 5 of 7, She could do no wrong. And then, the rest of the game was what it was. But Aaliyah Crump came out fearless, hit 2 of 3 threes. She's someone who's going to help. Now she finished the game with a poor shooting percentage. I think she was 1 of 8 after opening 5 of 7, but I think she finished 2 of 9 actually after opening 5 of 7. So, but she defends. She's 6'1". She's a freshman, and I thought that was great. Jordan Lee is my breakout player this year because she showed us she could hang in the big moments last year. Huge performance in the win over LSU in Austin. I thought she was just fantastic last night. Efficient, scored 21. 4 offensive rebounds. Like she does the dirty work. And when you add her with Madison Booker and Rory Harmon and Aaliyah Crump, and we didn't even get to see Ashton Judd, who is going to be out for a while with her injury, I'm told. So, but also Brea Cunningham, the Arizona transfer, 7 of 7 last night. I get it. It's incarnate word. Look, 7 of 7 against Air is good. Kyla Oldiger was 7 of 7. So your center position was 14 of 14, Eric. It looks like, I didn't even mention the, Woodward, the transfer from Boston College. This team is deep is what I'm trying to say. And Brianna Preston comes in. She's still a one-woman fast break. I think this, just first glance, lot to like.
No, Chip, I will be candid here. I have not had a chance to really watch the game. I had a chance to look at the box score that was sent out by Texas. And a lot of the things that you noted there are kind of what stood out to me, right? The big thing, I think, for me is it's a nice segue. Steve Sarkisian talking about youth versus inexperience. You know who can make that same claim? Vic Schaefer, right? Taylor Jones ain't walking through that door anymore. Shea Holly ain't walking through that door anymore, right? Last year, while I understand, this player didn't play, but Layla Filia was supposed to be a player who, played 3-4 years in Michigan, right? This is a kind of an evolution of the team. I'd say that the team is a little more mixed. Chip, I think you would agree in terms of inexperience, an infusion of youth, while you still have your vets like Rory Harmon, mid-range Maddie, Madison Booker, et cetera, right? So like you said, it's incarnate word, Jasmine player, first game as a head coach after being on J.C. Hoyt's staff at Oklahoma State. So incarnate word certainly has a ways to go as far as their program, but this is a really nice start for Vic in his club.
Yeah, Taya Sidbury is the Boston College transfer. I like what we saw of her as well. Grabbed a few rebounds, had a couple steals, and Aaliyah Crump with 2 steals. So you like that. Roy Harmon and Madison Booker, their usual great selves. Roy Harmon distributing, setting everybody up, 5 assists. She only played 20 minutes. Maddie Booker had 18 on 6 of 11 shooting. So they're number 4 in the country, and they'll play some better teams as we go. Eric, the Texas men's basketball team, I'm all about my man Cam Heide. That's the guy I'm watching to see how they use him. How do they put this 6'7" shooter, a guy who can crash the boards, do a little bit of everything. I want him to be a better shooting. Well, it's not going to be Brock Cunningham, but a guy who can, be physical, but hit big shots. Your thoughts?
I think shooting's gonna be the name of the game for this team, right? Let's go ahead and do this thought experiment right here as I kind of opine on Cam Heide. Chip and I, just in the press box, we were casually talking about our starting lineup for the Texas men's basketball team. And I published that actually last week over at horns247.com. And I'm still waffling on it, to be honest. But I'll let you know who I had, and then I'll go back and say where I'm kind of waffling. I have Jordan Pope, Kendall Weaver, Tremont Mark starting. So you could say 3 guard. I would call that 2 guard, and Tremont more as a wing. I think Tremont Mark operates best as a wing player. Tremont Mark. And then I have at the 4, Dalen Swain. And then, of course, at the 5, Matis Vokatitis. Where I'm waffling is this. I do think, as it's taping this on November the 4th here, right around noon Eastern time, 11:30 Central time. So we're about 6-7 hours. Actually, no, folks, it's a late tip off. It's an 8:45 tip off. This is part of a classic. So you're 8 hours away from tip off here. I do think Simeon Wilcher is going to end up in the starting lineup. I only say that because I just cannot make sense, Chip. Not make sense. I can't come to the place where a player who started 26 games for a St. John's team that advanced much further than Texas did last year, you bring him in and then say, hey, you're going to come off the bench, right? I just, the dynamics of college basketball in 2025, of college athletics in 2025, it doesn't make, the two don't equate to me, Chip, put to you that way. So I do think in the end, even though I have Kendall Weaver in my starting lineup, I think Simeon Wilcher is going to start. But with Camden Heide, what he brings is shooting, right? The thing that gives me pause is he's a guy who only played about, 10 to 14-ish minutes at Purdue. I think where Chip, and I won't speak for him, I'll let him opine, but I think what Chip will probably be betting on is high ceiling, right? You get size in the lineup. If you put Camden Heide at the 4, you get Dalen Swain at the 3, right? So you're 3 through 5. You got a lot of size. You got 7 foot, 6'10", 6'9", 6'8". Same thing with Swain, 6'7", 6'8", right? And Swain is known as one of the best two-way players, all-around players in the nation. Just take a look at his final game at Xavier: 27 points, a couple steals, a couple assists. I think he had 8 rebounds, right? Dalen Swain's, there's a reason he's up for the Small Forward of the Year award, the Julius Erving Small Forward of the Year award. Very versatile player, right? But anyhow, I'll pass the Chip so he can kind of give his starting 5, but mine is Pope, at least what I wrote for the site. Pope, Weaver, Mark, Swain, Vokatitis. I do think Weaver actually will come off the bench when, I get to Spectrum Center behind me, and I think Simeon Wilcher, because he started 26 games at St. John's, will be in the starting lineup, Chip.
Yeah. I would have Wilcher, Mark, and I've got Heide in there, but Kendall Weaver might be the better option. But Dalen Swain for sure. And I want Lucina Traore in there. I want the grizzled veteran who's got a track record of playing super physical and dominating on the glass. I know it was at Long Beach, but Sean Miller did say that Traore would have been a starter for them at Xavier if he didn't tear up his knee. I wouldn't mind Pope, Weaver, coming in off the bench, and Matis coming in off the bench because he's, really skilled. He's athletic. We'll see how these guys handle their roles, who's better. Some guys are better coming off the bench. Some are not. So I think that's going to be the good news is there are enough good players, we think, that you could have, 2 disparate starting lineups like you and I have. And I do think Heide had to wait his turn at Purdue. He was behind some talented guys on a team that played for the national championship. And I think he's a super X factor for this team. We'll see if he's as good as I think he is, but those are good. Those are good things to have going. Anything else, Eric, before we move on to some take it or leave it?
Yeah, just super quick. I'll run through it again for any Texas fans who may have been, super plugged in with football. Of course, the primary returners on this team: Tremont Mark, Kendall Weaver, Jordan Pope, Nick Cody, a name we didn't mention, but those are really your 4 primary returners. And then, of course, in the transfer portal, in case, again, you were plugged into football, right? A lot of the additions, you have some of the international guys, and those are going to be more long-term projects, right? In terms of Declan Deru and Lewis O'Brien and others. Matis is obviously international, but he's a transfer guy, right? He's played in college last year. Matis Vokatitis was the American Athletic Conference Freshman of the Year with Florida Atlantic, as Chip did a great job talking about. Lucina Traore averaged a double-double with Long Beach State, would have been a starter at Xavier last year. Simeon Wilcher, kind of that Northeast guard, right? A guy from the Northeast ends up in a New York City at St. John's. You bring him in. He's a guy who averaged, memory, I'm off the top of my head here, I want to say averaged like 8.5 points as a freshman. Numbers dipped a little bit. Obviously, you had a coaching change and
6'4", so good length.
So good length, yeah, right. Probably asked to do some more defensive things there. So, and of course, Dalen Swain. I guess for those, again, we should probably give just a quick rundown. Dalen Swain, right? Dalen Swain is a high ceiling player. Is he Trey Johnson? He's not Trey in terms of scoring. However, what you look for in today's basketball, a super athletic guy who's north of 6'6". Dalen is 6'8", 225, long wingspan, two-way player. Sean Mills looking for him to expand his game to not just be, a guy who operates in the mid-range, but can expand and shoot from three, right? Dalen Swain is the major pickup. Dalen Swain is a guy who probably could have written his ticket to any program in the nation in the transfer portal. So for those who may not be familiar with the new additions, those are the names to watch. But Dalen Swain is the big time addition for Sean Miller in Texas. Of course, he played with Sean Miller last year at Xavier.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting. All right. And for Texas volleyball, it's been a rough stretch here. They went to A&M. They lost 3-2 for their first loss of the season, and then had to come home and play Kentucky, number 3 Kentucky, and Kentucky looks like a national championship contender. They are massive. They were blocking Texas everywhere. I thought their blocking was better than Texas's, and point blank. And so a bit of a wake-up call for Texas women's volleyball, but better to have those wake-up calls now than in the NCAA tournament. So we'll see how the Texas women bounce back from those setbacks. All right, Eric, let's get to some take it or leave it. You ready?
We'll do it right after this break, Chip.
All right, let's do it right after this break. Hey, welcome back to the Flagship Podcast. It is that time for us to get to everybody's favorite part of the show, a little take it or leave it. Eric, how did we do last week?
Chip, it was a bit of a rebound week for us. After going 1-2, we both went 2-0 as far as the take it or leave it that can be scored. The first take it or leave it was Ryan Niblett will have a punt return of 40 yards or more. We both left that. He did not. And the second one that could be scored was Diego Pavia will be forced into at least one turnover. Of course, Colin Simmons was the benefactor there for that turnover. The third one was Texas basketball will reach the Sweet 16. We'll have to come back to that later in the year. So we have we have one that can be scored this week. So let's get us going, Chip. And I am pitching to you first. Take a look at number 1. Texas will be in the top 12 of the debut college football playoff rankings, which of course come out this evening. Chip, take it or leave it.
Yeah, I think they should be, honestly. I know the Texas fans, a lot of people were down on this team for the way that they were scratching out wins over Kentucky and Mississippi State, but Texas now has 2 top 10 wins over Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, and I think they're trending in the right direction. I had Texas at 12. I vote in the Football Writers Association poll, their Super 16 poll. And so I don't know what this college football playoff committee is going to do, but I'm going to take this because I think they should be in the top 12. Eric, what say you?
I am going to take it, Chip. I am optimistic about the idea that the SEC will reign supreme in the college football playoff when it's all said and done. Chip, it would not shock me to see as many as 5 Southeastern Conference teams in the college football playoff. As a byproduct of that, I think Texas, provided, they don't lose to both Texas A&M and Georgia, will find their way in the CFP. So I'm kind of projecting here, and I do think in this debut rankings, they will be in the top 12.
Okay. All right. Take it or leave it. Number 2, Eric, Texas's defensive issues the last 2 games are primarily because Michael Taft Texas's second team All-American in 2024, was out with, recovering from thumb surgery. Take it or leave it.
I see. This is kind of a hard question. Okay, I will take it, but here's kind of my quick answer. I don't want to run too long. I think Mississippi State's a matter of styles make fights. Mississippi State wanted to move fast. They had a way they want to attack the defense. I don't think, while Michael Taft would have helped, right? I think that's the styles make fights. Texas didn't have a defensive issue for 3 quarters, right? And then they had one against Vandy. Again, you could make the argument that Michael Taft would have done a better job communicating in the back end. Some of those things don't happen, specifically the coverage bust where you get the wide open touchdown against Vandy. But I also think, Jelani McDonald being out hurt and Manny Muhammad kind of being an out hurt. So I'll take it, but it's not quite that cut and dry for me. What says you, Chip?
I will take it for the exact same reasons you just laid out. Yeah, I mean, Michael Taft, I think we've seen some coverage breakdowns at the linebacker level. I think Michael Taft has, an influence on that as well. I mean, he's helping everybody in the back seven get lined up. And I think that has been sorely missed. And we've been reporting since the surgery that the earliest target return date for Michael Taft is Georgia. So I'm still hearing that. That's when I think, barring any setbacks, I think we'll see Michael Taft back out on the field. So take it or leave it. Number 3, Eric.
Take it or leave it. Number 3, the biggest concern in the off week is the offensive line. Take it or leave it, Chip.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say running the football. So I don't know. They're kind of intertwined. Would you say, or no?
They are intertwined, of course. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is a take or a leave, but I would say the biggest concern is the ability to run the football. So maybe it's a leave. Because Steve Sarkisian has to figure out, okay, now we've got Cole Hudson at left guard, Connor Robertson at center. What do we major in terms of running the football? What does CJ Baxter do best? What does Quintravian Wisner do best? Doesn't have to be the same thing, but can this offensive line gap scheme for CJ Baxter? Can they zone for Quintravian Wisner? But Texas has to run the football, Eric, against Georgia, against Texas A&M, against Arkansas. If they're going to be a real contending team down the stretch, they cannot average 1.1 yards per carry like they did against Georgia in both games a year ago. So I will leave this and say the biggest concern should be running the football. What say you?
I'm going to take it just because I think if you cannot keep Eli Manning, wow. Okay. It only took me 3 years to do that. Right. What's next? If you can't, I must've been watching ESPN. If you
You're watching the Manning cast.
If you can't keep Arch Manning upright, you're not going to have an offense. Right. So I'm going to take it from that perspective, Chip.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. All right. Here we go. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this week's episode of the Flagship Podcast, previewing Texas's off week, talking a little hoops, talking a little Texas women's volleyball. Please help us out by liking and subscribing to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel so that we can grow, so our bosses are happy. And until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com, where become an annual member. It's super cheap and you get all the information, all the scoop. And that's where we hang out. So thanks for listening, everybody. For Eric Henry, I'm Chip Brown. Stay safe and keep the faith.